just to introduce DJ, who is with Akamai, and John, who John, who is RePubIT. And both of them have been incredibly active members of ICICLE now for several years, and actually are also the co-chairs of our workforce uh, MIG, Market Interest Group. So, welcome everybody, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'll turn it over to DJ and John.
And I'll unmute so you can hear me. Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I guess we've got people really from
Evening.
around the globe, so this is exciting. Um, as Michael said, my name is John Costa, CEO of RePubIT Inc. It's an e-learning and learning engineering company, and I've also been chairing a number of committees with IEEE in the Learning Technology Standards Committee space for, gosh, the last 10, 11 years. This one is the latest, and DJ and I are co-chairing it. DJ, a little quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in training and development almost 15 years now, and I've pretty much always been in the tech space, designing technical trainings, and I specialize in training customers. So right now, as Michael said, I'm at a company called Akamai Technologies, and so I'll be presenting a case study a little later on about kind of our organization and how we're using learning engineering so far in the training that we roll out.
Perfect. So this event is being recorded, so I see a lot of people still continuing to stream in. You'll have access to the entire presentation after the fact. This is our overview of what we wanted to talk about today. We did our introductions. We want to first talk about how learning engineering applies to the workforce space. So learning engineering has got applications in higher ed, K-12, military government, and we are the group that focuses on applying it in the workforce sector for supporting employee learning and engagement, et cetera. And then we'll talk a little bit about the structure of learning engineering to give you a sense of what it's all about, how workforce learning engineering differs from other sectors, and then we're going to dive into a couple of case studies. We've got some live projects that we've worked on for embedding a learning engineering mentality and methodology into corporations. After each one of those, we'll take a quick Q&A. We'll talk about some of the barriers to success people within our market interest group have experienced, and then a few next steps. How could you get involved if it's something that you feel applies to you? We've got a whole series of QR codes at the end for places you could sign up. So you want me to take a couple of these, DJ? The what is?
Yeah.
Okay. Learning engineering is something that became apparent to us. There's a history to it. It's on the next slide, but it's an actual process taking you all the way through the conceptualization form for your training and learning, all the way through distribution and capturing of data. And what we discovered over the years of doing various projects within IEEE and trying to put an engineering rigor around it is that there are various aspects of learning engineering that are in practice, but they don't work together within organizations. So our goal was to try and weave all of these together into a full process. You'll see we use an image of a flower to demonstrate that. The whole concept of it came from Herbert Simon's project, I guess, back in his initiative at CMU, Carnegie Mellon, back in the late 60s. And he came up with this theory of it, and then Carnegie Mellon developed it into a disciplinary learning engineering department or group within the organization within CMU in 2014. Shortly after that is when ICICLE formed to drive this forward and build some standardization around it. The uh, first, I guess, we had a conference back in 2018, 2019, and that was the first time we started to gather people together around this from the various markets. And a book was published. This is a great reference. We've got some links to this later on. And then in 2023, Arizona State put together a program on learning engineering as a way to, oh, thanks, Jody. I just saw her pop up some links. So they put together the program within their university to actually study learning and education as a learning engineering initiative. So that's weaving in all of the various different petals to it. The who, what, where, why, and when of learning engineering. These are all of the entities that will benefit. These will be benefactors of a learning engineering discipline within an organization, a corporation, a university. And these are also the people that could study and benefit from it. So we've got your everything from instructional design. I saw a question in the sign-up sheet. So what's the difference between an instructional designer and a learning engineer? Well, on this next slide, you'll see the series of petals. The instructional designers are part of the learning engineering initiative. And so instructional designers will be elevated because they're going to be introduced to a lot more technology and data analytics and things like that that are part of the engineering discipline.
Yeah, I can talk to this one. So
Go
the
ahead.
flower is it's one of the first things I found when I was looking for a way to connect learning and data. I think that for me was a big area of interest. It's something I wanted to do better in my organization. And I found this little group called Icicle, and I said, what is this flower? I started to analyze them and look across each petal and realize that it's not a methodology. It's not, if you've done instructional design, it's not an ADDIE flow. There's no one model or one right way to do it, but it's more of an approach, a practice. Um, and when we think about all these different petals on the flower, you've got training professionals, you've got, learning engineers, but you also have software engineers and data scientists or data analysts. You have folks involved in learning sciences, but you also have subject matter experts, SMEs, and then those who specialize in assessment, a measurement, and an evaluation. So looking across all of these petals, not only is instructional design represented, but learning experience design represented. But we have lots of other pieces included in this flower that I hadn't really thought about. But building a cross-functional team that has each of these petals well represented will provide you with the resources that you need for that learning engineering success. Yeah. So when we look at the learning engineering process, it's quite iterative. So if you've, ever done any of the agile methodology, this might seem kind of somewhat familiar, but the idea of starting in the center with your challenge. So understanding how you can improve the learning, how you can create better conditions, increasing that learning capability for your audience. And then you kind of stretch out to see, like, when we create courses and we look at them, are we designing in this iterative process where we develop, we test, and we kind of use these mini processes? Um, if so, then you kind of move forward to the next step of implementing and then collecting that data, evaluating, and coming back to create. So it's the cyclical process where you kind of jump through each of the stages. And that kind of helps you understand the challenge, how best to approach it, and the areas of success. So again, using data to help drive the outcomes that come with this iterative process. And one thing we pointed out was that while for other groups, if you've been to these invitational learning engineering sessions previously with the higher ed, the pre PK-12, and the government and military market interest groups, there's a lot of focus on interdisciplinary connection, so reaching across all those disciplines. But what's really beautiful about learning engineering in the workforce environment is that it's more than just being interdisciplinary, but it's interdepartmental. So it's finding ways to connect across all of these different departments to find the best way to solve the challenge and using the data you collect along the way to help you improve with each iteration.
And I just popped this back up, DJ, to
Yeah.
kind of represent the various departments that are involved in the whole process. And what we tend to do is want to bridge and get collaboration amongst all these groups. If they're not all in one department, which is oftentimes not likely,
Yeah.
you want to create an environment where the learning engineering spans these multiple departments, and you got buy-in with your IT departments, your data, your business intelligence groups.
Yeah.
That'll become a little bit clearer when we talk about the case studies and the various groups that we had to engage with. So sorry to interrupt.
No, no, perfect.
We good?
Yeah.
So how are we doing on time? We're at 12. First check-in.
So what's your familiarity with learning engineering? Are you brand new? Are you somewhat familiar with the concepts? Or are you a learning engineering professional? This is what you do day in, day out. We'll give another moment for those
Yeah.
votes to come in.
We have 34 of the 35 of the 47 people in attendance.
Awesome.
I'm going to go ahead and end that. Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
36, getting your last vote there. Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
thanks.
And here's what people said.
So yeah, I mean, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been out there pushing the concept of this, and a couple of conferences we've had. We're starting to get some familiarity with the whole concept. When you explain it to someone in your organization, they get it because they know that there's a lot more to this and there's a purpose for learning and training in the workforce. It's people realize that it can be and should be strategic. And that's one of the concepts that we try to uh, drive forward is to get learning and development tied in with the business end of things so that we are driving, strategic change and strategic improvement
Yeah.
throughout our organizations. So what do we do with this poll, Michael? Just close it out, or
Yeah,
is it
feel
shared
free
with
to close it.
everybody?
I've saved all those data. So, yep.
Perfect.
All
Thank you.
right.
Speaking of data collection, so really why the workforce needs learning engineering. We talked about this. We talk about this a lot in our market interest group focused on workforce. They're really seeing that learning engineering as a catalyst for, creating learning strategy that's proactive and it has a way to span all those different departments represented by that flower. The way that learning engineering can kind of solve some of these business problems, it will allow stakeholders to, become more connected with the work that you're doing day to day. A lot of times, stakeholders are only involved in certain planning or strategy, but when it comes down to keeping them informed and using data to help, build business cases, a lot of times in a training organization, that step is non-existent. So learning engineering can help kind of close that gap and keep those stakeholders connected. Learning engineering can also help with this idea that having a beautiful learning management system, no matter how many bells and whistles and features and dollars that you throw at it, having that LMS does not equal strategy, learning strategy. So the idea of using learning engineering to help with this strategy outside of just using a platform. Learning engineering can also solve the idea of lack of engagement. When you're using data to inform decisions that you'll make about future designs of training, it will allow you to see what material gets the most engagement, what doesn't, and then how you can best adjust your content moving forward so that it has that increased engagement. I think the biggest takeaway from the learning engineering framework is really being proactive and searching out, it's kind of this research scientific mindset. I'm looking for a great way to solve this before, reacting to that problem in the moment. So being proactive and not reactive.
Yeah, DJ, that was a huge takeaway at the Learning Leadership Conference last week. I sat in a panel with uh, Frank Wynn, ex-Amazon and now consultant in the whole learning space. And his panel members all talked about if you're not within that executive management team, you've got to align yourself with somebody who is, because L&D needs to have an understanding of what's happening with the organization, the direction they're going, if shifts or changes are coming, and be proactive about helping get all of the staff and workforce ready for these changes rather than react.
Absolutely. So
So
when we,
this,
oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
go for
I
it.
was just going to say that on this slide here, this is the same flower petal, but there are a set of these that are particularly important to the workforce education and workforce training. And those are the data science, learning experience design, assessment, measurement, and evaluation, and then the software engineering. And DJ, if you want to expand a little
Yeah.
bit about these, you had some interesting things you talked about yesterday on
Yeah, I
each of
think
these.
these top four petals, I think for me are the biggest takeaways when it comes to success within workforce. We look at collecting data, but making sense of the data, analyzing that data, finding insights within that data. If you have someone who is a data scientist, a data analyst, even if they aren't full-time dedicated on your team, but it's maybe a resource you have internally that you can use, or you upskill one of your employees to be able to kind of navigate that data more confidently, that it unlocks a lot of insights into how you're building training and how it exists within your organization, who you're delivering your training to, how it's being received. That more than just smile sheets and more than just understanding the completion rates or enrollment rates, it's taking a look at those larger trends in the data. Learning experience design, I think this is kind of maybe a default assumption, but really having someone who understands the entirety of the structure and the learning journey as your learner goes throughout their process, and whether it's onboarding new employees or with my organization, we train mostly our external customers. You're still needing someone who evaluates that entire learning journey for your learners. Then we have assessment, measurement, evaluation. Again, kind of going back to that. Are you capturing smile sheets, star ratings? What does it look like? What data are you collecting? And then how does it get used? And then software engineering, you need someone behind the scenes who understands how to connect all of these pieces. So you can have a great training, you can have a great LMS, and you collect data, but and maybe a business insight tool, but to find someone who can kind of help you string all of these together, you're going to need someone who's well versed in, software, who's able to help you on the back end with the structure and the integrations that you need.
So
Oh
the
yeah, so
difference is, oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to say that the workforce being different than any of the other invitational learning engineering groups that have talked before, we have this really strong tie to training work and business goals. So really understanding the return on your investment, the investment that is needed, and then how the business is going to be impacted by the decision that the training, whatever decisions you make around training and those training programs, their success, their engagement. Also, within workforce, I have found myself that it's a lot harder to win that stakeholder alignment, but it is even more crucial to secure it. So, working with stakeholders, they can be folks who are in different business units. They can be executive leadership, and maybe people who are not knowledgeable about training at all. And so, how do you convey the importance without data to back it up? That's where learning engineering kind of comes into play to help you win over that stakeholder engagement and their buy-in. And then finally, connecting the training to dollars. So, with the progress being made within trainings, what business income are you seeing as a result, or lack of spending are you seeing as a result? So, really tying back to the business goals and then that revenue impact that you can have.
And that's a perfect segue now into the reasoning behind this first case study. This was an organization that I started working with back in 2023. Um, and the reason we got engaged was that exact point, the financials. For some context, this was a mid-sized organization, about 150 mil in revenue. They did not have CLO representation up in their executive suite. So the L&D department was kind of a firefighting team. When a problem occurred, they'd make a training. Let's fix it with a training. They had been operating at a net loss for 6 straight years. And at this point, they had to fix it. They had quality erosion going on, and all eyes were on the CFO, the chief financial officer, who was the guy that kind of kicked this thing off with us. When we looked at L&D from their perspective, they're feeling understaffed. There was high attrition going on because of that, 6 year loss in running. Budgets tighten up, pressure is there, and people were leaving, but there's hiring freezes on. So that was preventing them from staffing up. They couldn't buy new tools. They were using legacy. They had an in-person mindset, and that's one of the things we tried to shift with them in our approach that we took. It's a little bit innovative. We wanted to move some of the training into the workflow. And there was big departmental resistance to working with L&D because of the pressures that when you're operating at a loss like that, everybody throughout the organization feels it. So when L&D was approaching various departments, there was friction and pushback. They didn't have time. L&D didn't have time, but the mandate came down and corporate said, all right, listen, we've got to chop 25% off of the budget of our learning and development organization. And you got to deliver everything on time, no excuses for lateness, and you've got to improve the quality because that was eroding a little bit. And it was, unquestionable. This is how we started the process. So what we wanted to do was take all of their training and the training that was needed for the various departments and all the tasks that they had to deal with and move this into a performance support. We wanted to bring training out into the workflow so people didn't have to disengage from work and go and train on things. So what we've got is a process. When you look at a workflow, it's made up of a series of processes. Every process is made up, use the rule of seven tasks in a process, 7 steps within a task. Every step has some details about it. Every step has supporting knowledge. That's the background information that people need to know, the why. Why am I doing this? There's a series of references and resources that they may tie to and utilize in doing their work on a daily basis. There's also resources in terms of people and contacts to go and ask and inquire. All of that material is not necessary to train in a conference room. You bring that into what we call this digital coach, and that's the tool set. It's basically just a collection of knowledge and information that is gathered and quickly available to everybody. So everyone within the organization is now marching to the same set of instructional tools that so you're eliminating transparency there. Anything that was what we deemed highly critical, we would do an impact analysis on all of the tasks, and anything that had to stay in formal training, those were the critical items. So as we step through this process, what is our methodology for applying learning engineering and moving a lot of the training into this coach tool? So this methodology starts with a rapid workflow analysis. What do we do in that? We talk to all of the players. We start to get everybody engaged so everybody has ownership of this solution that's coming out. We've got the SMEs talking with the L&D department and mapping out the steps, who has to do what, when, and in what order. We get that all marked down. Then we do this critical impact of failure analysis. I'll show you a little graph for what those impact levels are, but it's a 1 to 7 scale. Then we start to gather background knowledge that's necessary to explain basically why they're doing all these tasks and why they have to be done correctly and what happens if they're not done correctly, who are they impacting. So that's that background knowledge. All this data and information is gathered into what we call our digital coach blueprint. And then throughout this process, we are paying attention to what needs to be measured. How do we prove that this is going to help the corporation towards that mandate, towards reducing turnover, towards reducing onboarding slowness, or any issues that came up during those interviews when we were talking to all the teams, we kept track of and determined if we could measure items as we're going along through this process based on the training and the use of that training and the activities that the people are doing on a regular basis. We want to do that measurement automatically. We don't want to keep asking people questions and query them. Oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? We want to let the systems intrinsically pull that data out so that we can then leverage it. Other things and insights we got out of the whole interview process and mapping of the workflow were spots for optimization. Evidence-based gaps. Are there things that we can measure to determine if it's viable and create an ROI on restaffing in certain areas? That interdepartmental design, that was bridging those gaps between all the groups and getting them talking and collaborating so they both own the process. And the whole idea is cyclical improvement. We want to make this iterative so that you can work it, run it for a bit. If you see an issue or a concern, there's a communication layer set up so that people can explain what needs to be modified and get those modifications put right into the system immediately. And that's the whole human system interaction piece of it. You want everybody working with the tools and able to instill kind of a change and improvement process on it. Targeted outcomes we were looking for. We wanted to, quantitatively, we knew we had to reduce cost of labor. We had to improve our data collection because we wanted to be able to show return on investment for the L&D department, return on investment for the process change and modification. And this TTP, what's that stand for? Time to productivity, I think. And that's because of that attrition that they had going on. You want to be able to use these tools that you create for the main training as part of your onboarding. tool set. So you're learning the internal coaching mechanisms while you're doing your onboarding, and you're going to use that tool from here on out until it's so memorized that you don't need the tool anymore. And then qualitatively changing kind of the mindset to shift it from uh, conference room, training center type of learning to take a lot of that learning. And on average, we've experienced like 50%. You can move probably half of your training out of the conference room. People forget it anyways. You've heard of the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Within a few days, to a week, you've forgotten like 75, 80% of everything that you've ingested during a conference room session. We call it the fire hose. You move that out into a tool where people can get at it when they need it. They're going to learn it better because they're applying it while they're learning it and seeing immediate results from that. So it solidifies that knowledge. These are some of the tools that I've been kind of mentioning here. This is the end result. You want to get to a organizational tool. This company here wanted it to look more like an app. So it was designed to look like an application where you've got your workflows. If you click the workflow button, you can jump in and see the different processes. If you drill into the processes, you're down at the task level. Drill into the tasks here, and you can see the steps below every task. Drill into that, and you can even look at more details. If you want that supporting background knowledge, the why for each of these tasks, that's in the About tab up here. If you've got tools that people need, spreadsheets and templates and little instruction guides or things like that that are already published or exist somewhere, you link to that stuff in your tools section so they can quickly get at everything that they need to do every step in this whole process. And then you've got contacts if they exist. There might be an expert that they can contact for more detailed information or for support. But the whole idea of having this information in a coach is to eliminate the need for contacting someone for help. Because if you do that, you've now taken two people out of productivity because you're asking the questions, you're not producing, and they're answering you, so they stop doing their job. So it's all about efficiency. The data behind every click on that digital coach screen I was just showing you is captured in here. And so you've got your series of actions that you may capture, clicks on the menus, clicks on the help, click on, the phone link to call one of those contacts. All that information is captured, and then a lot of granular data about each action is gathered. And then you mine this out into reports later on. There were a lot more than what was just showing on screen. That was just a little screen cap of a couple of clicks that went through. So we create this big data map where you've got 80 to 100 data elements or nodes that you gather with every single one of the actions. The actions are all across the top, whether they're watching a video, whether they printed something out, did they download something, did they click on a link? And that's all the background information and data that you gather without having to say, what did you think about this? Is this tool helpful? And things. You can see that they're using it and they're in there in action. And so you're gathering a ton of info on the back end. Another thing I mentioned, and I'm pushing the limits of my time here. I'm going to start to speed up. This is that critical impact of failure. This is how we decide what goes into a coach. If it's an insignificant impact, if you did a task wrong or you forgot to do that task, that could be in the coach. Moderate impact stuff, probably still in the coach. Once you get up into a significant area where you're going to damage some process down the road or in this catastrophic level, this is talked about as impact on the organization itself. Are you going to fiscally impact the organization by doing something wrong or forgetting a task or doing things out of order? a lot of people equate catastrophic to, oh, somebody's going to die, but it's not always that. But if there's negative impact on your organization, it's going to go up the chain of command. These are the things that you leave in targeted training, and you don't bother building it into the coach because you want to make sure that someone has gone through that whole training scenario. This last slide here is simply, this is a massive spreadsheet, and we talk about a lot of these things in our MIG meetings. But this is where a technician and a learning engineer will be gathering all the material and mapping every task and step and resource and template. Here on the left, assigning the critical impact of failure numbers, and then identifying items that need to be developed or items that are already existing. And this is just a roadmap of all the media and materials that you need for your uh, digital coach and corporate on the job or on the fly training build out. We call it the LEAP plan, the learning experience and performance plan. Okay, last slide, the results of this effort. So we had 6 trainings that were created by the team up here to actually teach people how to do the process of building out the training materials. And then the training created about 64 departmental training programs a year. And so we looked at the times for delivering, times for onboarding, and times for building these courses. And in our analysis, we assigned L&D average wages, SME average wages, because these are the people participating in this whole build out and delivery process. And we identified a significant amount of waste through our interviewing process because of communication breakdowns, waiting, searching for items that weren't organized and readily available. So these are all the things that a digital coach is going to eliminate in a day-to-day workflow in operations. What ended up happening is at the end of the year, 2024, we built this in 23, used it in 24, and discovered about 48% of savings across L&D and SME labor that was necessary to produce all of that courseware and deliver it all. And then when you add in the waste elimination of 20%, we're now looking at about $694,000 in savings within the L&D department. And L&D was responsible for pushing money across to the various departments when we were using their SMEs to help build the training material. So we close to 700,000 there, just shy of $1 million. That was 8% contribution to the corporate net loss reduction. In 2023, they operated at a net loss of 11 million, and it was reduced to only a net loss of 2 million in 2024. We can't, obviously, we don't take responsibility and credit for all of that savings because there were a lot of other changes that the organization did. But our modifications in our process added up to about 8% contribution to that. So I'm going to stop and ask if anybody has any questions. I haven't been looking at the chat. Michael, did you see
So,
anything?
John, yeah, we probably just have one question we can get to given the tight time. Emily asked, what are the common measurement designs in workforce applications, and particularly asking pre and post, and interested to learn if there are causal experimental designs that are attempted or how exactly the ROI is being measured. And if you can answer that in 60 seconds, I'll be amazed. So maybe that requires some follow-up. Maybe a quick response from you and DJ.
Well, when I experienced, we had to deal with the CFO pretty closely throughout this process. So everything was being related back to cost reduction, time reduction. And so we were trying to measure the time invested and communication mechanisms, the response rates for people to, getting back to you on emails and things. So a lot of that information was gathered uh, from various sources, and then we distilled it down to determine if we were able to improve those processes and, get rid of a lot of that waste. But everything had to relate back to financials because that was our goal. We had that 25% mandate, a reduction of cost. Um, and so we wanted to measure efficiency, we wanted to measure time waste reduction, things like that. And it's probably not clear. If you'd like more specifics, reach out by all means. There's a QR code at the end of this where with our contact information in it.
Yeah. And I would say too that each uh, instance is going to have its own unique measurement requirements. And so it's important to understand what needs to be measured and what you're kind of being measured against. But each time you approach a new training challenge, it'll be different. So I'll share in my use case next up. You can go ahead and jump toward it, John, um, about my organization and kind of how we're looking at measurement because it's different than what John was sharing. So we're looking at Akamai Technologies, the organization where I work. It's a cloud computing, cybersecurity, web hosting provider, and annual revenue 3.99 billion. They have 11,000 plus employees, 50,000 plus customers, and revenue generating partners under that umbrella. So, some of the challenges we had when taking a look at training, specifically for our customers, were that a lot of the trainings were developed by different teams throughout the organization, and they were under different business units. So, they were kind of isolated from each other, and we had a lot of difficulty connecting and making sure that our content was well aligned. We also didn't have a unified learner data model, and we didn't have really well identified performance metrics. So we had completion rates that we looked at for enrollment rates for engagement. But beyond that, really understanding what types of data we wanted to measure and then how that impacted the business. That was kind of the gap in our data modeling and in our performance metrics that we had identified. We weren't really able to track the customer retention, the customer add-ons. So when it's time for them to renew their contract with us, do they want to add even more products to what they're currently getting? Or the churn rate. So how likely are they to stick with us? How long are they likely to be a customer of ours? Do they drop off and come back, or do they drop off and stay off? So that's really kind of the what we wanted to be able to track. So the actions we've taken so far, and this is still a work in progress, um, I started introducing the concept and language of learning engineering. Just initially kind of putting it out there, it kind of socialized the idea a bit more. I also proposed that we built out my team that represented multiple pedals. I was looking for team members who had the skill sets that represented at least a few pedals so that then we could start to build this somewhat cross-functional team under my purview. So recently I was looking at, what are the gaps that we have on this petal, the flower, and which petals do we not have well represented? So basically a gap assessment to understand where we needed to fill in. And then finally, we took the action of determining a high priority program to begin tracking data from our learning management system into our enterprise data warehouse or our data lake as a company that then fed into our business insight tool that we use. So if you use Power BI or Tableau, whatever it is to kind of create data visualizations within your org, that's the tool that we had a capability of connecting. And so our results so far, what we've had, I was able to hire two new team members recently, and they have some differentiated pedal representation. So I had to hire for a specific role, but I used that as an opportunity to look for candidates that also had these skill sets that would help round out our learning engineering flower and fill in some of those pedals where we had previous gaps. One of the biggest callouts was coming across a candidate that had a background in data analytics. And I have taken it upon myself to study more about data analytics. It's not anything that I had studied previously. I was, really in the training content creation world, but using that as an opportunity to find new talent, bring them in, and have them serve, in the role that they were hired to do, plus have them, bring those additional skills to really round out that flower. We also piloted a connection from our learning management system to our enterprise data warehouse, our larger data lake, and then our business insight tool. It's kind of a chain. We piloted that connection for the high priority program we had identified. And so we have that now up and running, and we can start to build some insights based on the data that we have coming in around that one program. Um, and then finally, we have kind of the plan to assemble a larger cross-functional task force. So beyond just my team, bringing in folks from all these different teams, departments that create the training and that are involved, all the stakeholders involved. Um, we want to make a space where all of those groups can come together and, sound off so we can start to build more of that collaborative functionality and building out that cross-functional, that task force. So in um, in my positioning of learning engineering, I will say our organization, we've not yet adopted this learning engineering mindset quite yet, but I'm working on building that further. And but as I move through it, and as we've helped others move through that process in their organizations as well, in our market interest group for workforce, we've found a couple of these strong barriers to success. And so we've put together the top four really that are the strongest and some solutions that we can suggest. So the first one is a lack of executive understanding. This quote of like training is a cost center, it's a compliance checkbox, and not fully understanding the business enablement that is underneath what training can do. So, really using learning engineering, reframing the conversation, and tying initiatives to those metrics where you're now collecting data. You're looking at revenue, adoption, retention, and this can be for employees, for customers, whatever that looks like for your organization in the workforce. You use that data storytelling skill and start with pilot programs, small wins, and that builds a credibility and that stakeholder buy-in over time. The second one is siloed teams and tools. As I shared, this is a challenge in my current organization. You look at L&D, you have IT, operations, they all work in kind of isolated, in these isolated groups, and they don't have a chance to collaborate. So our suggestion for a solution here is to use that learning engineering as a shared language. So start embedding that language in your projects, in your proposals, in how you approach the strategy, to start bridging those different silos and have that common language be the learning engineering process. So, building a small cross-functional project team, as Molly was calling out in the chat earlier, even if it's not your direct team, but it's maybe a project or a task team that you're connected to, that can help highlight the shared outcomes for each of the groups involved. So it's not just how does our team benefit, but how do we all benefit? And then how does that benefit impact the organization as a whole? Number three, there's a really strong over reliance on a traditional learning management system, an LMS. that, oh yeah, it just solves everything. If we just get all these features, it'll be great. It has gamification on it, so it must mean that it's magic. But we all know, of course, that an LMS is just a platform. It's just a tool, and there's limitations to what it can achieve. So our suggestion on the solution here is to educate those stakeholders on just where those limitations are. Try to introduce any integrations, open source tools, if that's something that is accepted at your organization. I work in a protected industry, so it's a little bit different on what we can do. But if you have that flexibility, and I think that's a wonderful way to start to work with, connecting that data from your LMS to your larger enterprise data warehouse, your larger data lake as an organization, any workflow tools or automation tools, and really show what's possible using the LMS as kind of one of the puzzle pieces to solve this larger learning technology, picture. And finally, talking about the data analysis and how a lot of teams have really limited capacity for it, whether it's not having the skill set or not having the understanding, not knowing what they're being measured against. Yes, your LMS may be collecting data day to day, but what are you doing with it? And if you don't have the resources to make that data and the subsequent um, trends actionable. So our solution suggested here is to start small, use a few key metrics that you want to go after and to really understand, and use tools, resources that you already have. I'm sure most people have access to Excel. If you don't, then maybe Numbers if it's included on your Mac. If you don't, then you have Google Sheets. And if you don't have access to Google, you can probably use like OpenOffice, LibreOffice. So there's a lot of different resources that you probably already have access to that you can use to help visualize trends and to parse that data. And finally, our last suggestion is to treat data analysis as a team skill. So not just having one person on the team that is comfortable with data, but have the entire team being comfortable in data. And there's a reason that the first half of this year, every workforce market interest group meeting we had, we focused on different facets of data. We really did a deep dive. So that data analysis is incredibly important.
I like Molly and Michael's comments about, expand your toolkit. If all you
Mhm.
have is a hammer, everything everything looks like a nail, but don't build more hammers.
Yes.
Integrate other tools into it and make sure that you're following data standards so you can now share and merge your data in these BI tools.
Yeah.
So we have another poll.
Yeah. So which one of these four that we kind of talked through, um, it really stands out as being the barriers are the biggest concern within your organization? You have lack of executive understanding, siloed teams and tools, over reliance on traditional LMS, or limited capacity for data analytics.
Do I need to abstain?
All
I
right.
would. I know
I
what
was
the
thinking
industry
that.
issue is.
Yeah, Molly says, do I need to pick one? I know it's difficult. I think if you have one that stands out, definitely pick that one that seems the most applicable. For me, it's the limited capacity for data analytics. That's the strongest one in my org.
In the interest of time, I'm going to close this poll.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
So our suggestions for kind of the best next steps,
Oh, what happened?
Oh, I'm back. I don't know what happened. I got kicked off.
Oh,
So the next steps, it really depends on if you're solo or if you're a team leader. So for solo champions, really working on reframing those projects with the learning engineering mindset, using minimum viable products or small test projects to kind of evaluate and illuminate how powerful learning engineering can be. And, our biggest takeaway for the solo folks is pick a pedal and get to work. For team leaders, it's a little bit more strategic. Cross-training team members, making sure that all your team members are well versed in each of those pedals, at least a little. Defining the value proposition as a team and finding ways to build up that stakeholder trust by kind of these small experimental wins. Yeah. And oh yes, to think in systems and not in silos. Um,
th-
yeah, go
now
ahead.
we're going to talk for a little bit about the MIGs and the SIGs within the learning engineering group. So you see it's a grid here. The markets, we're one of the markets, the workforce, government military is one, higher ed, PK-12, and then special interest groups kind of span or apply to every one of these market verticals. So there's how many of them? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight,
Right.
nine of us, nine groups that meet on a regular basis. So we want you to think about if any of these are of keen interest.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a link in a minute to go and read a little bit more about them. They're all free. You're welcome to sign up for any of them. Michael just put up a poll. Actually, this is perfect to uh, let you chime in on groups that you might have interest in.
Oh, wow. Oh, look at all those responses. I love it.
Coming around the final turn. It's designed for learning and workforce, designed for learning.
All right. Thanks, Michael. I think we can end the poll too, so we can get to the uh, final piece here.
Here's another list of them,
Yeah.
screen captured if you want. But that QR code will take you to this list and deeper descriptions. I'll leave the QR on screen for a second.
And then finally, this is our call to say, please join the Workforce MIG. Our next session is Friday, October 31st, very spooky. And it's at 12 p.m. Eastern. We meet the last Friday of every month. And our focus will be on internal communication this next month. Previous months, we've had some guest speakers, we've had authors come in, we've had focuses on different topics like stakeholder management and data. So, there really is a lot of benefit to coming to join us, like peer support, sharing resources, having that collaboration, and a sounding board to help you figure out and experiment where you want to go next. It's where
All those
I
barriers.
started and what provided a lot of support to me in getting learning engineering at least socialized within my organization.
We do deep dives on all those barriers that
Yeah, we do.
everyone is experiencing. Here's a set of tools and references from the ICICLE organization. There's textbooks out there. The resource link, again, another QR code, top right. Quick screen cap. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm
Yeah.
blasting through
Thank you,
these.
John.
Yeah. And finally, thank you for everyone who came and attended, asked us questions. I know we didn't get to answering all of them, but I tried to kind of keep going in the chat. And I know Jody and Molly, you both have been in the chat as well to answer some of those questions that have been brought up. So thank you all.
Great. Well, John and DJ, thank you so very much. And thank you to all of you for sticking through the whole session. Really appreciate it. This is the last in our series of the Invitation to Learning Engineering. However, we are going to continue this and go down some of those horizontals that you saw in the
Mm.
diagram, and look at some of the context and other pieces. So get involved. The real work of ICICLE is done in the SIGs and MIGs. So join, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again, John and DG. Really appreciate it. Great job.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Michael.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.